It's a weird paradox or tension around wealth building.
That having too much is a problem.
You think that extra $100,000 or that extra $50,000 is going to be life-changing, and then you make it and you don't feel the same.
I know what it feels like to get by. This meal
In the microwave?
is symbolic of be so deeply satisfied with and clear on what my enough is.
Yeah.
Again.
You put your foot in this. This teriyaki.
Frozen pot stickers that I got
delicious.
from Costco.
There's a time where an unexpected expense for me was a real problem. And you're right, some stuff you experience and you just don't want to experience it again. The littlest things remind you and take you right back. And I think that wiring is still in there.
Okay, chopsticks.
Dumplings and salmon.
I am probably not gonna ever buy store-bought teriyaki again.
You put your foot in this one.
Yeah, and it's simple, and I know this, but I just need to add this to the rotation.
Yeah.
Sometimes that store-bought is so simple, but this, at least I know exactly what's in it, and there's no preservatives, and Bo loves teriyaki too, so.
This is the kind of sauce you put on everything. You don't just, typically I just reserve teriyaki for certain dishes. I would put this on just about anything.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
Well, thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Speaking of Bo, did he tell you about the lost jacket?
Okay.
The raincoat.
The blue one.
Yes.
Okay.
The one that he begged me for, the one that he was super excited about.
I don't know, there was a backstory.
Yes, begged me for this jacket, because I ordered that and the denim one at the same time.
Yeah.
That's our thing. He tells me what he wants and we find it. Anyway, only wore it a couple times, and then I started asking him about it, where is it? And he's like, oh, I don't know, maybe I left it at school.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I was like, you better bring that jacket home. You better bring that jacket. And a couple days went by, still nothing. I said, well, check with your grandma's, maybe you left it at their house, nothing. And I would say I got unreasonably upset. I didn't spank him or anything, but I was hot. And it surprised me. It surprised me. But I definitely used my mama voice when I was talking to him about this jacket, to let him know how upset I was.
Yeah, losing your jacket or the fear of losing your jacket is almost like a rite of passage. You know you've done it, you gotta do it at least once, and then your mom or your dad or both will never let you forget it.
Yeah, I just did not expect me to have that reaction. It was one of those moments that I worried about, did I scar him? Because I had such an outsized reaction for such a small purchase.
Well, I don't think, well, one, you know, that's relative, whether or not it's a small purchase. I mean, obviously for us, you know, it's not a big deal. But I do think it's important for him to understand what my mom used to call the value of a dollar. Like for me, I know what it feels like to get by, to live paycheck to paycheck, to live like right on the edge of poverty, right? Like unable to fly high, but not as terrible as like some people who just really have no other options.
Yeah.
And things like that are devastating, not just for you, but you feel it in your mom. Like in my case, like I felt it, like I knew that mistake that I made, and certainly that response, because they never let you forget it, is like you feel it because it's weeks of income, or a month in some cases, like based on some mistake that you made that your mom or your dad or whoever it is that's like raising you has to work for to kind of earn that money back. Or even worse, if it was a gift and someone like really went above and beyond, and then you just kind of let something bad happen to it or allowed it to get stolen. Like it's one of those things that I think just kind of reminds me of the importance of having some empathy for the people who are in those environments every single day. Because it just, you think differently, you react differently, you feel differently, and you're so much more sensitive to how expensive just life in general can be. And to your point, it has an effect not just on your general mood, but how you raise your children.
Yes.
When you're in it, it's not like you don't know you don't have enough, because all you know is what you see, right? You just, it's just regular life for you. It's not until you see kids or people who have more that you realize that more was an option and you just don't have it. You know what I mean? And so that's one of the weird parts about living in that kind of world, or living paycheck to paycheck, or feeling stuck in that cycle, is because when you're in it, you know, you make the most of it, and as a result, like you, in some weird way, kind of take pride in your ability to survive it.
To be resourceful.
And to be resourceful, but at the same time, you want more for yourself. Like even now, I have a mental memory of one night where I was home alone, and I think my mom had went out to a party or something like that, and I was old enough to stay home by myself, like it wasn't a big deal. But I was home alone, and all I needed to do was heat up my food in the microwave. Like it was already ready, I could just heat it up whenever I was ready.
Right.
And I put it in the microwave. I don't know why I didn't notice that there was a bag of like pretzels in there.
In the microwave?
Yeah, there was a bag of pretzels in the microwave, and I must have just, I have no idea why I didn't recognize that. But I turned on the microwave.
Were they normally in the microwave?
I'll explain. I put my food in the microwave. I must have pushed that bag of pretzels aside. My mind now, as I'm replaying it, I must have run back to like catch something of a commercial break or something.
Got distracted.
Got distracted, and I started hearing pop, 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 pop. And I didn't know what was going on. And I ran back into the kitchen, looked at the microwave, and there was a little fire in there.
Ooh.
So we had a bag of pretzels. There was a zip tie, and you know the zip tie has like a little tiny piece of aluminum.
Oh yeah, I did that one.
And to answer your question, the reason why the pretzels were in the bag was because that was one of the safe places where like mice and roaches couldn't get to your food, right? So if there was like something that you really liked and you just put it in the cupboard, then there was a chance that, you know, it might happen. And again, this wasn't because we were dirty or, you know, unsanitary. That's just because of the environment that we lived in, and it was just kind of normal. And so even now, as I think about all these little things, I would just, where you find a way, resourcefulness, right? You take pride in your ability, like, oh, it's almost like a hack. But then now, as I think about it, especially when I don't know what it is, but like whenever I think about microwaves, that idea, that memory is like, no pun intended, burned into my brain like forever. So all of that to say, Bo's gonna have his moments. He's not gonna have a microwave fire moment. This might be his moment, but I think, and he may not recognize it until maybe he's a teenager or something.
Oh Lord.
But there's gonna be a time where he realizes that, oh wow, I was kind of a jerk and a little flippant about the money that my mom can spend or my dad can spend on me.
Yeah, as soon as you say I might be the topic of his therapy, I start feeling bad again. Because, you know, I'm supposed to have done the inner work of not worrying about stuff. You know, you are not your things. Like, I'm supposed to be okay with the fact that a thing is gone. As long as he's okay, as long as we're okay, as long as we have a roof over our head. I'm supposed to be okay with that. Like, that's where I'm supposed to be evolved in my money story. But I think, to your point, like, it's about the unexpected expense of it all. Like, there was a time where an unexpected expense for me, and I wasn't a child, this was when I was out of my parents' house. There was a time where an unexpected expense for me was a real problem. Yeah. Like, and I think that wiring is still in there, and you're right, like some stuff you experience and you just don't want to experience it again, or like the littlest things remind you and take you right back to where you were emotionally. You know, it's interesting that you brought up the trauma, because you're right. People define their trauma relative to someone else or something else.
Yeah.
And so when you have someone who is experiencing chronic low levels of what I call little T trauma or big T trauma, whatever it is, they always think that it is less urgent or requires less care than someone who has experienced like a one-time event.
Yeah.
And we do that with a lot of things. We do that with enough too. We define what is enough for us
relative to how much other people have. Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't think we've landed or even started the discussion as a culture on how to define enough.
So I think about enough the same way I think about financial freedom, right? It's an idea, right? We've met people who have $100,000 and feel financially free, like free from something, but they probably are the happiest they've ever been. We know multimillionaires who are miserable and feel confused because they know people who have significantly more than them and they feel like they did something wrong. So it's an idea, and I think enough is an idea too. It's not just relative, but it's just an idea, and I think it's unique to everyone. I define enough by your ability to respond to the maintenance that life requires, right? Like it costs money to live. There are things that you have to take care of. And if you don't have enough, right, like that more often than not sends you into a tailspin. You're scrambling, you're trying to figure out what you need to do in order to fix the problem that has all of a sudden showed up on your front door.
Yes.
And that, I think, is probably a way better way than to try to put some arbitrary number, whether too big or too small.
Yes.
Whether it's 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund or 2.5 that you think you may need in retirement. Like, either way, you may not ever feel like you have enough, or you might not feel like you have enough based on whatever shows up at your front door and your ability to respond to it. And I think that's why it's such a difficult, but at least for me, interesting concept.
Yeah, I like that. I like that definition, because it is part your ability, which lends itself to the resourcefulness that you're talking about, where people are able to figure it out sometimes. But it is also how you respond emotionally.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when I bought my car, when I could not afford it. I could afford it on paper. I had enough on paper to qualify for the loan, but you're right, the maintenance that car required would stress me out. Like, if I got a flat tire, or if it needed an oil change, or if the speaker went out, or whatever happened, like I was stressed.
Yeah.
I was calling my parents. I was moving money from the checking to the savings, savings to the checking. I was robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like, it was a struggle for me. And now still have the same car, but like now I am honored to maintain it. I take pride in the
Yeah.
fact that that thing is still running,
Yeah.
and that if I get a flat tire, it's a couple AAA bumps and a tow to the tire place or a flat in the back. Like, I now feel equipped
Yeah.
to be able to maintain what I have because I have enough.
I feel the same way about this home, right? So this is my second home. This is your first that we bought together. But remember, the first one that I bought it in 2007.
Yeah.
The world fell apart in 2008. It lost
Yeah.
half its value. And I was sitting there with a fixer-upper and holding on to it. And
Yeah.
I could hardly keep that thing afloat. I was nervous. I was stressed out. I was working
Resentful.
multiple jobs. I was resentful.
Yeah.
I was grateful that at the time I was also learning about business and the market. And I knew, or at least began to suspect, that this might be something that we'd seen before historically, and I was right about that. And I'm grateful that a few years later, when I finally did have the money, I was able to kind of put together a debt payoff plan and a wealth building plan, and certainly expedited that when we met. But I know and remember like what those days felt like. I mean, again, you talk about trauma. You talk about trauma. I know what it feels like to hear the scurrying of a squirrel in your wall and being fearful that
Or
that's
the
gonna
drip
the drip
of something.
When you hear a drip,
Oh my
a
God.
quiet house is one of the scariest sounds in the world. It's one of the reasons why I hate this damn ice maker. Because every now and then I hear a couple drips and I start thinking that there's a pipe,
leak
and I'm gonna have to
somewhere.
start exploring in the wall and
Well, you
figuring it
remember
out.
when we moved in this house, they had to cut a hole in the ceiling.
Twice.
Yeah, because
Twice.
we discovered the leaks early.
This one was a roof, and that one was, I think it was a seal in the tub upstairs
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that created a bit of a leaky situation.
Yeah, there was yes,
But
exactly.
yeah, anytime I hear water dripping, or even if it's just like in the sink, I hear it and I am just reminded that, oh my God, this might be, because you never know. It could just be the sink.
Needs to be, like, the filter
Or-
needs to be drained.
Or it could be, well, we don't know, we're gonna have to explore.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
I remember one time going back to the other house, I had the maintenance guy come in and he was trying to make a decision as to whether or not he was gonna have to go into the floor because he didn't know where this other leak was going to. And I was like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like, you're not digging
A hole in my
hole
floor.
in the floor. Not a hole, it was almost like a valley.
Yeah.
Going from here all the way up into the middle, because I think this is where it is. I was like, we're not exploring, we're not mining for leaks in my kitchen. You know what I mean? Again, it's not just the stress of being a homeowner or, you know, someone who took out a note on a car. It's just like the idea of not really knowing how you can solve the problems that life naturally or inevitably have brought. Like, things do break down.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, that's just one of the better ways to think about whether or not you have enough or not.
Yes,
Right? Like,
or too much.
yes,
right?
or too much.
Do you feel a low level of stress?
Yeah.
Every time you wake up, or every time you walk into your house or get into your car and there's a light coming on, or, you know, your washer makes a weird noise.
Yeah.
It's a sign. It's a signal from your body that you don't have enough to maintain this life that you've built, and now it's time to start purging, start minimizing, start really deciding the things that you value and actually want to maintain versus the things that you have and you are resenting the fact that they require maintenance.
Yeah. think people feel like they're making the safe bet by always aiming for more.
Yes.
Right? Like more is better.
Correct.
Bigger is better.
Yeah.
Just in case. But I do not believe that that's true, right?
No.
Like to me, I think it's clear that not having enough is a problem.
100%.
It's not as clear that having too much is a problem.
Correct.
Everyone believes that having more than enough is exactly what you need to be aiming for, because when you have more than enough, you can solve all these problems. And you don't realize that actually, like, the truth is somewhere. I feel like joy, that joy that people are looking for is somewhere in between. There's that sweet spot.
Yes.
Not too much.
Yeah.
Not, certainly more than, you need, but like there's that sweet spot right in the middle. Like that's where I think joy sits, right there.
In the just enough.
The just enough.
Yeah.
Just enough.
Yeah, I think it's because people want more than enough because they want the ability to have a cushion, right?
Yeah.
When something happens, I have enough and then I have this cushion, this more than, so that even if something happens, I still have enough. But what they don't understand, or what we haven't decided as a culture, is that your enough should be inclusive of any cushion that's required.
Yeah.
Right? You don't need to aim for more because there's no end to that.
Yeah.
As long as you believe that there is more, you will never find enough.
And more there will always be more.
There will
right?
always be more.
Like,
so it's an endless cycle where you're aiming for this like ambiguous target of more than enough, but like that can go forever, which is how people continue to work when they have more than enough money to retire, why they continue to create exploitative businesses when they have more than enough to not do that.
Yeah.
It's because they're chasing this thing that has no end.
Yeah, and I think that's just where things really spiral out of control. It's a tough, there's a reason why there's so many books about money and like psychology. Not enough, in my opinion, about like culture and society as it relates to money. Because this is not a how-to, definitive answer. If that were the case, then there would be clear answers. Like, this is exactly how much you need in order to be happy. Right. No one can say that because there's always a possibility.
Well, they have proven that there are diminishing returns after a certain income level. Because
And I think a lot of people hear that and they think it's bullshit. And I can say from personal experience, I definitely remember making that amount of money. I think it was like $75,000 or something like that. I remember making that and it felt like heaven. Like I could not wrap my head around that I was someone. I mean, I could because I had hoped for it and worked for it. I didn't think it was going to happen so soon, those kinds of things. But then shortly after that, it very quickly feels like, that's not enough. You know what I mean? I kind of need a little bit more than that. And then I also remember raises not hitting the same.
Well,
after that amount.
So that's what people get wrong about the research. The research is not that you're going to be less happy, it's that you need even more money to get the same level of happiness.
Correct.
So there's a level of happiness that you get when you make $200,000. You need to make $750,000 to get the same level of happiness. Anything in between doesn't feel nearly as good as that $200,000 or that first $75,000.
Right.
And so when you're chasing and chasing, you have to take a big leap. With those big leaps comes other requirements that also diminish your happiness because you're making trade-offs, right? You want to go from $200,000 to $750,000. Well, you're going to have to give up some things there anyway. So it's a weird paradox or tension around wealth building, which is why you have to do the mental work, because otherwise you think that extra $100,000 or that extra $50,000 is going to be life-changing, and then you make it and you don't feel the same. And so now you're chasing the high and you keep going for more and more and more and more and more. And the number just keeps getting higher. After $750,000, you got to make $1.2 million. After that, you got to make 3.3. Like it's a ridiculous leap.
This meal, and honestly, even this house for me, is symbolic of at least my best attempt to be so deeply satisfied with and clear on what my enough is.
Yeah.
Like, there are tons of people on the internet that would say salmon teriyaki with sauteed vegetables is super basic, especially with
Not this teriyaki.
frozen pot stickers that I
They're
got
delicious.
from Costco. But I'm willing to bet there are just as many people that are like, that's super fancy and I can't make
Yeah.
that, and I'd rather just go to a restaurant to get there to make it, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it just kind of proves that point. For me, the ability to make it at home, the fact that my son is gonna come home and see this and be like, oh my gosh, you guys had salmon teriyaki without me. The fact that we live in a home in a neighborhood that I know for a fact 10 years ago I dreamed about. Like my mentor lives in this neighborhood, and I remember thinking one day I'm gonna be your neighbor. And so to know that I live down the street from where I met him when I was waiting tables, and we own it here. And by the way, like, it's probably the most valuable property in the community, right? Maybe one of, but like, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to flex. I'm just saying these things happen, and I'm not gonna say, oh, it's because I put it on the vision board. You know,
I am.
Okay. He's just gonna give it all to God. He's gonna take all the credit. But for me, it's just, you know, as much as I love it here, as much as I love this meal, I'm not gonna lie and act like there aren't days where I don't wish that I could do more.
Yeah.
Like, sure, I wish I could be eating this in Asia somewhere.
Yeah.
Great. Sure, I visit other homes sometimes and say, wow, maybe one day. But I also know that when I get home, I was like, oh, that place was kind of big.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I don't want to have to deal with all the other things that those people deal with. And so for me, it's just, you know, I think people owe it to themselves to go beyond, to at least experience a little bit of luxury. Scratch the itch, taste those things. But when you design your life around those things, I think it is a recipe for disaster. You've got to figure out what that, I don't want to call it an amount, but like what that right feeling is, what that lifestyle is. And there are
And
some
it's not
numbers.
a set point.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not. It could change and
Yeah.
changes as your life changes, but you have to do that work, and you have to enforce that feeling in a way, respect it and enforce it so that your lifestyle does not continuously creep and then you're always chasing for something else.
And so you can retire.
No,
Because I
that
think
too.
what people don't talk about is when you have not defined enough, when you haven't decided what it is, when you haven't like wrestled with the idea of it, not only do you always chase more, thinking more is possible and thinking you need more, you also assume that you need more money than you actually do.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates this cycle where people just continue to work forever and ever and ever and ever, instead of taking what they have and realizing that that is enough.
Yeah. Well, cheers to that.
Cheers.
Okay, chopsticks.